Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is if you have your moon in Aquarius and Venus in Scorpio. I love these kinds of readings. When you have the combination of Aquarius and Scorpio, or just air sign and water sign in general, but I especially like it when Scorpio is present because Scorpio just adds a layer of fun times, doesn't it? But yeah, I remember doing a video where it was like the sun in Aquarius and the moon in Scorpio, and I got so many responses because I think people were happy to kind of like talk about their challenges of having that kind of combination. And I would say that this is going to be similar to that in certain ways. Of course, there will be differences because these are all inner placements. So, they affect you very personally, your moon sign and your Venus sign, and particularly as it pertains to relationships, because Venus can specialize in that, and then the moon has to do with your emotions. So let's just talk about the functions of each planet and then how they come together. So the moon represents our emotional nature, point blank. So I, for instance, have the moon in Virgo. I would say that the moon in Virgo and the moon in Aquarius have certain similarities. Even though, Virgo is an earth sign and Aquarius is an air sign, I feel like they're both analytical. And I don't feel that they are emotional in and of themselves. But you cannot just state that as the ultimate truth, because if you look at other factors, you will see that there are hidden factors that sometimes will make these observations not completely accurate. So, like for instance, in my case, I do have an opposition between the moon and Chiron. If you have contact with Chiron in any way, but especially if it's a conjunction or a hard angle like a square or opposition, then you may be more emotional than the typical moon in Aquarius. And even like house placement, that can certainly play a big part in it. If you have the moon in the 12th house, it could be like having the moon in Pisces, or even in any of the water houses, the 4th or the 8th houses either. So anyway, that will just give you perhaps a sub-influence that is more watery and more emotional. But in general, we would say that the moon in Aquarius can be extremely detached. And that is not necessarily bad. I have come to believe after, doing, I don't know how many chart readings I've done personally. It has to be probably over 1,400 by now, that some people are much more, kind of like they have an advantage if they have the moon in an air sign, because it can save them a lot of grief emotionally, because they probably do not take things to heart the way other moon sign positions would. But that is not a guarantee. There are other factors that will definitely factor into this. But I was going to say the problem, but I don't want to make it something horrible. The challenge is that Venus in Scorpio means that you have this hard angle between the moon and Venus. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that this is going to be true. As a matter of fact, you might even have a trine. How would that happen? If your moon is at a late degree of Scorpio and you have a very early degree. Did I say late degree of Scorpio? I meant for the moon position, late degree of Aquarius. So, in other words, very close to the cusp of Pisces, and then maybe an early degree Venus in Scorpio, you would actually have a trine. So, yeah, I mean, that could actually be very, beneficial or positive. But in general, if we just look at these two signs, we're looking at diametrically opposed types of energies, even though they're not opposing one another like you would think in terms of the symbolism. They certainly are not operating, in a harmonious way, I would say. So this may show up more often in personal relationships. And even like friendships, you might find that it's no biggie, but you might find that in romantic relationships, that's where things get a little weird. Because the reason I say this is because if you have the moon in Scorpio, I keep saying moon in Scorpio, if you have the moon in Aquarius, Aquarius rules the 11th house in astrology, which is a house of friendships and groups. So people with the moon in Aquarius, you're basically coming from a position where you don't believe in possessiveness in terms of your basic nature doesn't go there, like is not clingy. You can grant people their freedom very easily, but it's the sign of the friend. So even like like with love relationships, like I have Venus in Aquarius, and this is kind of like my basic nature too, or my mentality, but it doesn't really the problem is that you have to look at the chart as a whole, because sometimes there might be counter influences that can make the person more possessive. And I feel like because Venus is the one that has, the placement in Scorpio, this could be the one area where it's kind of like your Achilles heel when it comes to your emotions, and you find yourself very vulnerable in love, but not vulnerable in the way that Pisces is. Vulnerable in that it may feel threatening for you to get close to someone. You may have intimacy issues, and I'm not talking about sex per se. I'm talking about emotionally. And because, Scorpio rules the 8th house in astrology, so it's a water house. And so ultimately, even though, sex can also play a part in it, I could see somebody with this combination and also looking at other things where they might actually substitute sex for love in certain cases, or confuse it even sometimes. There may be people who take sex very seriously. That could certainly be the case, but I wouldn't be able to just state that affirmatively just by these two planets and signs. I'd have to look at more information to be able to make that determination. But I will say that with the moon in Aquarius, I just feel like such a person doesn't necessarily want to get too close to anyone. And this might even be like with friends as well. There's like an aloof quality that you may show to other people. And I love what I read somewhere where they said aloof but friendly, because there's going to be a friendly quality. It's not like just completely cold. Aquarius is social. Aquarius is not antisocial. Aquarius is social, but the problem is that the way that you show that you're being just caring in any kind of social interaction may be interpreted by somebody else as too aloof. And that's just, it is what it is. You know what I mean? You know, if this is your basic nature, I don't feel like you should have to alter it to make somebody else feel good about themselves. Because some people are very emotionally needy and it can kind of trigger them. But in general, you might have a very, caring nature. It's just that if somebody tries to encroach upon you to, and this can, when I say the word encroach, I mean like they might be trying to, be possessive, show that they're jealous, try to get you to do things that you don't necessarily want to do, and think that they have ownership because they happen to be your boyfriend or girlfriend or husband or wife. And you might resent the hell out of that. So the real trick is to even get to the point where you could commit to somebody in the first place, though. And so that takes you being able to really sort out what is truly going on here. And really, the reason that this can be crazy making for you and others is that with Venus and Scorpio, you might have a big jealous streak. And really, one of the ways that this is where you might be coming from is that you fear abandonment. You fear, like you might fear some kind of betrayal. And these are the real fears of Scorpio, but Scorpio has, it's really weird. In my mind, the word pride came out, and I thought, well, that doesn't sound like Scorpio to me. But I think that it could be because Scorpio really loves power. And I'm saying a Scorpio person, knowing that you're not, sun in Scorpio, but anything with an inner planet, I can talk about it. So people with Venus and Scorpio, especially if they don't really feel secure within themselves, they may try to, somehow be in a position of power within a relationship. And that makes them feel like they have the upper hand, because the last thing that they want is someone who is smothering them. But then on the other hand, you may, kind of mimic that behavior on your part. So it could be like you want that freedom, but you don't want to give it to that other person. Another way this can show up is that you may be very hot and cold within a relationship, or if you haven't gotten to the relationship stage, like if you're dating, you just might be like, one thing that can happen is that person with a moon in Aquarius, they can suddenly shut down just very, very abrupt. Oh my gosh, sorry about that. That was somebody calling me. But I was going to say somebody can shut down very abruptly, and that might be very unnerving for the other person. Like, and it, and if you have come from trauma, this is definitely something that I would think is a protective device where you're just like, okay, I don't want to go there. But even like if you really fall in love with someone, that might be traumatic because it's finally the first person that you really care for. So I'm not even saying it would be like if that it would work one way. It would actually, I would even say if you really have feelings for someone, that could be when you would most likely do this, because you feel threatened over how much power that person has over you, or, looking at it from the moon sign position, how much potential there is for you to have to let down that. I wouldn't call it a guard. I actually think Scorpio is the one that has the guard, because there's trust issues with Scorpio. But with Aquarius, I was going to say it's more like a fortress, but it's really this desire maybe not to ever get too emotional. Like, you might just be in general adverse to a lot of emotional intensity in life, and anyone that brings that out in you or who exhibits it themselves, you might be kind of like against that, or kind of like rejecting that. You have to look at other factors like your sun sign, because your sun sign is your central influence. So, that will give more information about that. If your sun sign is in a water sign, for instance, which would mean Cancer, Scorpio, or Pisces, you might be a little bit more comfortable with emotions in general, and less likely to be afraid of them. Actually, because Venus is in Scorpio, the one sun sign that would probably have to would be Scorpio, because Venus is never very far from the sun. It's like only 45 degrees from the sun. I suppose it's possible to have, your sun in Pisces and have Venus in Scorpio. I think no. That's totally impossible. That would be totally impossible. But yeah, so it would have to be Scorpio sun sign. And because, Scorpio is the same sort of energy, then it might be difficult, but you still might have that desire to have intense emotional experiences. And also you have the sub-influence from the water houses, the 4th, 8th, and 12th houses. If your moon is there, that kind of gives you a little bit more possibility of that being something that is comfortable for you, while at the same time uncomfortable. But it's like, I guess the word I should use is familiar, not comfortable. But in any case, in terms of how this may play out in relationships, I think I've touched upon it, where you want to keep things not very emotional, but by the same token, in romantic relationships, you may crave kind of like that body and soul type of interaction with a romantic partner, which is very intense. Maybe you're even attracted to Scorpio people, and that, like, if your sun sign is Aquarius, for instance, that would square you off to Scorpio, and that would make you very attracted to them physically, which is kind of like one of those, what would you call that, a catch-22, or just one of, a difficult situation. This is a difficult situation all the way around. But it can, to me, difficult situations can also be dynamic, because there's so much dramatic energy attached to them that the person may be very charismatic in a weird way. And so, like, if you have found that you tend to be attracted to intense people, for instance, they always say that a man should look to his Venus sign to see the type of woman he is attracted to. Obviously, we're talking about heterosexual relationships here. I don't know if that would apply to same-sex types of relationships. But in any case, what if a man is attracted to women who are very emotionally intense, and yet they have, and you know, because it goes along with their type of Venus, which can be the type of woman that they're attracted to, and yet they have a moon in Aquarius. That can be one of those patterns where your love life tends to be very tumultuous. So obviously, you know, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that you can't just know ahead of time what the Venus sign or any sign is of the person that you just meet, that you just feel, you know, attracted to. It just is what it is. But on the other hand, you can kind of like see the type of, you know, image they present, the type of behavior that they exhibit, and you can see for yourself if they are the type of person who is very, you know, wanting a relationship early on, like very premature in relationships. Well, that would be a red flag for somebody like you. Even though your Venus in Scorpio might want that, might be like, oh yeah, let's get married right away. Let's seal the deal. Your moon in Aquarius is breaking out in hives. And, you know, the moon is very important. It's a very important, I call the sun, moon, and rising signs the Holy Trinity. Definitely Venus and Mars and Mercury are important too, but I think that when you really pay attention to your emotional nature and let it and respect it, that can take the lead versus your Venus sign, which can indicate emotional, romantic attraction, but it doesn't necessarily lead to the kind of love that is going to be for you, because you have to take your emotional nature into account. You have to respect your emotional nature, and you have to also respect your sun sign and what it wants. And so a sun sign in that's a masculine sign, meaning air or fire, freedom is of utmost importance to you. So, you know, as enticing as it is to be involved with someone who might be either a Scorpio or maybe some other water sign, and they are super emotional, ultimately that could drag you down. That could be against you. But I'm not saying that it would be necessarily, because stranger things have happened, and also there are other elements that kind of balance things out sometimes. But definitely look at a potential for contradictory behavior where you might blow hot and cold. Do not, I don't, you know, resist the urge to ever ghost anyone, because the reason that I think that Moon and Aquarius people tend to specialize in ghosting, because they really don't want to hurt anyone, and they don't want a scene. They don't want the awkwardness or the discomfort of somebody getting all emotional in any way, whether it's anger, whether it's sadness, because they're breaking up with them. So resist that urge to do that, because that's kind of cowardly, and it can really, you know, be upsetting to another person, especially if that other person, you know, ironically, if you are dealing with somebody who is clingy, like let's say you found yourself bizarrely, you know, dating a Cancer or something like that, that type of person, you might be like, oh man, I have to get out of here. I can't, you know, be around this person. But you have to resist that urge to not do anything, even if you know that other person is very sensitive. Because even if, you know, sometimes people who are so afraid of abandonment, they actually bring that on themselves by being very possessive So the other person might be very possessive, and it's easy to see that that person kind of brought it on themselves for being that way. On the other hand, you don't want to exacerbate the issue by ghosting them, because then it's just going to traumatize them even further. And you know, when you break up with someone and you're just very straightforward about it and say, you know, I need a lot of space. I can't be with somebody who just wants to always be doing something. I have to have my alone time. I have to be able to have my own friends. I can't just be joined at the hip with someone. You know, that's not hurtful, because we all have different ideas of what relationships involve. The problem with you is that you actually have a part of yourself that might very well want to be joined at the hip. Maybe your sun sign is in Libra. You definitely can have, you know, Venus in Scorpio if your sun sign is in Libra. But your moon in Aquarius is I wouldn't call it the wild card, but it is that in a sense, you could say it's an outlier, meaning that it is not in alignment with what Libra represents and what Scorpio represents. And so, but it can be harmonious with Libra. They're both air signs. They could trine one another. So it could be very positive for your sun moon, possibly. But in terms of how it plays out with your Venus, in that scenario, again, there might be contradictory behavior where sometimes you just want to be very much that couple. But then if it gets too like involved, you might just kind of like totally, you know, detach and try to ghost that person. I was getting distracted because I was thinking of Sex and the City, and I was thinking of that character Big that Sarah Jessica Parker, or Carrie, was dealing with. This man that was like torturing her by always kind of like ghosting her. I don't know. He would always be breaking up with her. But then, you know, she cheated with him when he was married. So that was weird. I can't remember all the details. But it was one of those types of things where it was on again, off again. And that might be how you are, where it's like, again, you're blowing hot and cold. You know, maybe when you're away from that person, you start to really miss them and want to be with them. But it's kind of like, distance makes the heart grow fonder, you know, so it's not something I can totally sort out for you. It's something that I would definitely say that the moon in Aquarius, being able to transcend any fears of emotional intimacy, but also with Venus in Scorpio, you know, questioning why you might have certain suspicions in love, certain fears of abandonment, certain need to like kind of have the upper hand. And so that can kind of, sometimes it depends on other factors if somebody's going to be like that, but sometimes that can take place as well. And really question those things, because you will often find that you're trying to protect yourself. And really, when you're fearless in love, you know, the bottom line is you really don't need to do any of that, because it's all good. If that other person leaves, you know you're going to be okay. So, you know you're going to be able to get over it because you have like healthy detachment skills. But at the same time, you know, you can welcome somebody into your life. You know, you don't have to be afraid to love. Okay, that's what I have for you. I hope that this resonated. If you would like a private reading, the link is below. Take care. Bye.